Now, the whole point behind making a comic book movie, the whole point behind it is to have continuity between the movie and the actual comic books. And that's what a lot of these critics and all of these other people do not understand. Okay? Now, comic book store sales skyrocketed in the month where Suicide Squad came out. Okay? They went up over 31% of last year's comic book sales, and that is impressive. And of course, Suicide Squad and Harley Quinn were featured a lot in the comics. All right. But here's the really awesome part. The really awesome part is that DC's Rebirth, it had periodical comics that went up by 44.58%. That's almost double what they had the year before. Their graphic novels went up by 5.5%. See, the whole point behind having a comic book movie and why you want to have a accurate comic book movie is not just to drive toy sales and t-shirts and those kinds of things aside from the movie. No, you want to drive your comic book sales. That is why Zack Snyder and the DCEU's comic book approach to creating movies is the appropriate approach, because it allows people, when they leave a movie, to want to purchase comic books, to want to go more into the lore. And that is why Zack Snyder's whole vision cannot fail, because it drives DC sales. I'm going to show you some facts and some figures, which is why this is very important. It says here, the big month was enough to turn the year positive. Year-to-date comics and graphic novel sales to comic stores were up 2.71% through August, with nearly identical numbers for comics up 2.66% and graphic novels up 2.81%. Okay? For the second consecutive month, DC had the top market share in August. But unlikely July. In August, the lead was substantial, over 8 share points. You can see here that this is the August 2016 comic book channel market share. And you can see that DC Entertainment is leading that by a tremendous 9.27% over Marvel Comics. Here's Image Comics, Dark Horse Comics. Dark Horse Comics is Archie Comics now. Boom Studios, Dynamic Entertainment. We just talked about that video. Dynamic Entertainment is basically where you have Vampirilla, you have Titan Comics, Viz Media, Oni Press, and other non-top 10 comic book publishers. DC had 9 of the top 10 comic titles in August, with 3 number ones. Harley Quinn, All-Star Batman, and Suicide Squad, the top 3 books of the month. Beyond number ones, DC's Batman and Justice League are holding up as top 10 titles with their later issues. So look at this in August here. Of course, the number one seller is Harley Quinn, and you saw the comic above. All-Star Batman was the number 2. Suicide Squad is number 3, and that makes sense. Again, the movies drive these sales, you see. Then we had Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man's always been Marvel's go-to guy. Spider-Man is even better than Iron Man. It's well known. Everybody knows it from the lore. Spider-Man lore is well established, right? So Spider-Man. Then we had Suicide Squad Rebirth, Batman, Justice League, Harley Quinn, and Supergirl Rebirth. Now, you notice most of these are DC comics. Now, the reason why DC always wins out in terms of the comic book sales and so on is because DC caters to the comic books. Marvel doesn't cater to their comic books. They make movies which are not necessarily comic book accurate movies. When we think of Transformers is awesome, okay? But again, it's not comic book accurate in terms of the stories told. Whereas DC actually pulls stories, rip them from the pages of their comics. We even have dialogue ripped from the pages of their comics. You see? Because the whole purpose behind DC, even the first Batman 1989, I'm talking about recent Batman movies, right? 1989, Tim Burton's Batman encouraged people to read more Batman comics. In fact, I was reading Batman comics before Tim Burton's Batman came on the scene. All right, I remember reading The Dark Knight and so on after Robin's death. But the point being that Tim Burton's Batman in 1989, really, people were having that thirst because somewhere in the 1985s, 1984, 1985, Batman had started to change. He started becoming darker, okay, because of the death of Robin. Even though Frank Miller's Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, came before the death of Robin, the point is Batman was getting darker. So to see that on the screen, you know, that kind of Batman was just remarkable, okay? And Spider-Man has never been that kind of character, brooding. So it really changed the face of things. Now, we had Spider-Man back in the 70s as well, climbing walls and so on. It was fantastic. Don't get me wrong. We even had cartoon Spider-Man. But we never had a brooding superhero. Batman changed that whole dynamic. So, again, Tim Burton's Batman was, again, it still has some of the comic lore, even though he changed up a lot of things with respect to the Joker and with respect to the world. It still captured the essence of some of Frank Miller's vision. Okay. Now, when we look at top graphic novel sales, these are graphic novels. Okay, this is not the periodicals. We have Star Wars Dark Vader Volume 3, The Shoot Torin War TP. That increased. Okay, that's the number one right now. What's number two? Batman the Killing Joke Special Edition. Why? Because the movie Batman the Killing Joke came out. You see what I'm saying? That's what it's supposed to do. Why don't we have Captain America Civil War? Or even Civil War being one of the bigger graphic novels, or even the bigger comic books out there not being shown? Because the sales, and we can have a look and see if that happened when Civil War came out. But basically, when a movie comes out, it's supposed to drive comic book sales, okay? But of course, it's way down in August, so we may not see Civil War in this respect. In fact, but Civil War was, I believe Civil War came out in May, so that's kind of early. My point being, you won't see it for XMen either. You won't see that happening. Because, again, these comic book movies are not really catering to literally the comic books. So when I hear critics saying, oh, you need to have a story that veers far away from comic book genre, it just needs to be a good film and blah, 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 blah. DC's formula for Warner Brothers' formula is to drive the comic book genre, is to make sure that the comic books don't become obsolete, is so that people would read the literature. That's the whole point behind doing a movie. So I think, again, the critics need to reassess themselves. The people in media trying to down talk Suicide Squad, well, you just look at the sales and you will see the evidence is there. Again, I always come from facts. I don't come, you notice I do these videos to show you guys the facts so you can see the facts in front of your face and make a judgment from there. Now, we're going to do one more thing though. I'm going to do a next video, and the video is going to show comic book sales for comic books throughout the year, throughout the different months. All right? You guys have a great one.